Do you think he's eventually going to get fed up and just steal the strawberries off the table?
I mean, he might. Or he'll drink some whiskey.
Hi.
Because he likes the smell.
He loves getting his butt pet. He's so weird. What are you doing?
You gonna be a good boy?
No. No, I'm never a good boy.
I can be good boy adjacent.
Hi. Yes, we're still here.
A rough approximation of a good boy.
And he's off.
Or you regret walking in before, or not walking in before instead of after. He'll be fine.
Oh.
Hello.
He's interested.
Come say hi. Be my co-host.
I mean, it's about time you finally said something on the podcast.
I'll probably hear you barking.
I know.
Sniffing the microphone.
It's the strawberries behind the microphone, I think.
I wonder if I'll be able to hear that when I'm editing.
Maybe. That'd be really funny.
That'd be really funny, wouldn't it?
I don't know if this chair can sink.
People just think it's me.
No, this is as low as it goes. It's, hello. Hi. I can't spend this whole time cuddling you. I kind of have a job to do.
Yeah, cuddling the dog. With me. He's off. Here we are.
Guys, we're so excited.
It's the final episode.
The final episode of our first season of the Generally Spooky podcast. We made it.
We made it, everybody.
We're on episode 10.
We're actually here.
I know.
It's happening. And it's a good one. Mm-hmm. I'm excited.
Mm-hmm. Me too.
And you all know what it is for the first time.
Yes, we revealed it at the end of the last episode. Yes, we revealed our final episode topic ahead of time.
I know.
Because last week we were talking about Uckert Castle. And this week, we're talking Loch Ness Monster, baby.
Yeah. Although I've just realised, when we do the reveal, it's only a reveal to me, because everyone else sees the title of the episode before they listen.
I guess.
As a thought.
Yeah, I guess that's true. It's just different for us, because we're just talking.
Yeah. We're not listening to it on a podcast player.
I think the dog just tried to break into the kitchen. As if we wouldn't notice. No, out of all the cables.
Out of there.
You're not hanging out there. No. Why does he do this every time? There's one corner of the office behind where I sit at our desk. And the cable management is poor at best.
It's true.
And he always insists on either sitting on top of them all or walking through them as if they're vines in a jungle, and he gets caught in them all, and it's aggravating every time. Why do you do this?
Don't know. Now he's just standing staring at us. I'm like, well, where are you going now? Well, we'll see how you do. You might just have to go to your bed.
Yeah.
I mean, you're yawning, so...
Will he go to bed, though? No.
We poured ourselves a whiskey for the occasion.
We did. We get asked reasonably often what it is that we're drinking at the start of each episode. And we always have something, but, sometimes it's coffee, just juice. But today it's whiskey.
Yeah, I think we had whiskey on the first episode, so it's fitting that we do it on the last episode.
Well, I think a lot of the other episodes we recorded during the day.
Yeah.
So it just seemed a bit weird to have a whiskey at like 11 in the morning.
Yes, I have stuff to do after this. I can't just have a whiskey for breakfast.
But today... He's so demanding.
Yeah, I hope you heard that.
Lie down.
Go lie down.
But
Thinking
where?
about it.
You moved my bed.
Can't just lie down all fandangle.
He went to bed when I gave him some cheese last night.
Yeah, I could go get some kibble and I'm sure he's going.
Yeah. Get out of all the cables.
Yeah, okay.
Get out.
We're out. Actually, we'll just make this the intro. Cheers.
Cheers.
That was real nice.
Oh. We should probably say what we're drinking, in case there are any whiskey enthusiasts.
Sadly, it's not Sassenach whiskey.
It's been at least 10 weeks of this. And it's even bled into, like, our personal lives. Like, people talk to us about it. It's embarrassing.
Hilarious.
Please tell the people what you're listening.
I'm listening to my wife and the Generally Spooky podcast.
No, please tell the people what you're drinking. I've only had 2 sips.
2 sips.
They are.
No one can see my gesture.
Tell the people what you're drinking.
I am drinking Talisker Sky, and it's delicious. And I think it's my new favourite.
Talisker is Kieran's favourite whiskey.
Yeah, it used to be Old Pulteney.
Which is also very nice.
12 year. But now I think Talisker. Oh.
Talisker, in our humble opinion, makes the best rusty nail.
Yes.
If you have Talisker with Drambuie and some orange bitters. It's amazing.
It's so nice.
There's just something about Talisker in particular that makes a really nice rusty nail. Mm-hmm. But even on its own, it's nice.
Yeah. Really good. But I decided not to make one of them because they tend to get me quite drunk.
Yeah, we don't need that.
No. I need to be, at least comprehensive for this podcast.
Yes. I'm drinking Tamnavulin, which is a Speyside whiskey. And it's very, very nice.
Some of our friends gave to us.
They did. It's almost too drinkable. It's very smooth and it's not... Like, it doesn't have that intensity that a lot of whiskies do, so it just goes down too fast.
It's real nice.
It's really good.
It's all lighter in colour. Mm-hmm. And mine's 45%, so it burns. And I like it.
But we thought we'd celebrate the final episode of the season.
Yeah.
With a dram.
So if you happen to be listening of an evening, not while you're driving your car or going to work, please join us.
Yes, and if you're over the age of 18.
Yep.
Or whatever the drinking age is in your country.
And not pregnant.
Yeah. I feel like we probably don't need to say that, but...
Yeah.
You wonder, though. There's always someone.
What's for our pregnant friend who's listening, so she feels included?
Aaron, put the bottle down. Yeah, we wanted to celebrate, because this is huge, that we've actually made it.
We've done the thing. Mm-hmm. Or we're about to.
Well, we're going to have a little chat at the end about the season on the whole. A little bit of a rap party, just the two of us. Because it's just the two of us that do this, so...
And the dog just got himself uninvited.
He did, for being a very bad boy.
Yeah.
But, it's fine.
Classic. Well, shall we get started?
I guess I'm kind of nervous, because this is the big one.
Mm.
The tale of all tales. Well, this is the big one. The big finale. And I feel like everyone's probably seen it coming, even before we announced it last week. Because we live just outside Inverness.
It's a good one.
It was going to happen. But we're finally going to talk all things monster.
Whoa.
Today we are talking about the Loch Ness Monster.
This is our second monster, as I thought.
Yes.
There's the Glam's Castle monster.
Mm-hmm. Oh, and we talked about the Selkies. They're not strictly monsters. I wouldn't describe them that way, but
monstrous.
We have talked about them.
That's true. I'm close curtains because I can't quite see.
Better.
Briefly worse, but it will get better.
You don't need to see me. You just need to hear me. Mm-hmm. I'm pretty pumped for this story in particular. I feel like there's something about this story that captures the imagination more than most. Mm-hmm. Would you agree?
Yeah, I think so.
There's just something about it.
And, it's in popular culture all over the world. Mm-hmm. I'm pretty sure in How I Met Your Marshall, they talk about
How You Met Your Mother?
Oh, How I Met Your Mother. Marshall talks about the Loch Ness Monster.
He's obsessed with the Loch Ness Monster, isn't he?
I think so, yeah. Since South Park.
I haven't watched it for a very, very long time.
South Park mentioned the Loch Ness Monster.
Oh, yeah, Chef's family live by Loch Ness, don't they?
One about 350.
Well, yeah, I think you would be hard-pressed to find someone who has never, ever heard of the Loch Ness Monster at all. Mm-hmm. They probably exist, but for us at least, where we live, I think it's literally impossible to be here and meet someone who's never heard of the Loch Ness Monster. Impossible.
Yep.
And that's not me saying that everyone believes in the Loch Ness Monster.
No.
But everyone knows what it is and what the story is.
Yeah, I think so. When I was in America, in Colorado, people would ask, where are you from? And I'd just say the Highlands. And then they'd want specifics. I'm like, do you know anywhere in the Highlands? Like, why are you asking specifically? So he's like, oh, Inverness. Oh, I don't know it. I'm like, well, I know you don't. That's why I said the Highlands. But anyway.
But then I think a lot of people who don't live here don't really know which area the Highlands actually is.
I see a lot of people went, oh, the Highlands. So for the Highlands of Scotland, it is...
Yeah, but they wouldn't necessarily know where you lived because they won't know exactly what is included in the Highlands.
Well, that's true. That's true.
Because it's not just the top.
But yeah, but then I'd say, like, oh, it's near, like, Loch Ness, you know, like the Loch Ness Monster. And a few people were like, oh, yeah. And one person was just like, what's that?
Really?
Yeah. One guy who was a bit weird.
I don't understand.
And then I just didn't know what to say. I was like, like Inverness. Do you watch Outlander? No. It's a city in Scotland.
That's just what it is. I can't explain it any more than just saying that's where I live.
Yeah, I could get you a map if you're interested, but I don't think you are, so I don't know what are we doing here? I'm pretty sure I then convinced that same guy with someone else that Scotland and Wales had a war and England were in the middle being like, no guys, don't fight. And he was like, oh yeah, I've heard about that.
I can't think of a single time in history when England was the country being the peaceful mediator in a war. So I genuinely can't think of any. We
were all a bit drunk, and my friends and I were just in a piss-taking mood.
Well, you kind of popped my bubble in saying that you'd be hard-pressed to find anybody that hasn't heard of the Loch Ness Monster before. But I stand by it as something that is largely true.
I agree. I think I pressed hard and found that one person.
You found them. Had to be you.
Had to be me.
My personal troll.
Actually, I met someone who hasn't heard of them.
Mansplaining the Loch Ness Monster legend back to me.
Can you imagine?
I don't want to imagine.
Oh,
I'd rather not.
Too cringe.
Mm-hmm. But we've gone big for our first finale ever. We even have an interview with an expert.
Yes, we do.
Which was incredibly exciting and a big deal for a new project.
I think so. And it was a royal you organised it, interviewed him, and then have used it and listened to it. I still don't know. I hadn't heard it. Maybe you didn't.
I did. I have the recording. I did. But I spoke to Adrian Shine, who's been studying the loch itself for a long time. Incredibly interesting guy. I've included some of the things that we spoke about and some of the things he said. I don't think we're going to include the audio in this episode. I'm not really sure how we're going to do it yet, but we've debated listening to the interview together and talking about what Adrian has to say, or just posting the interview as a kind of bonus episode if you're interested in listening to the whole thing, because it was really interesting to talk to someone who is so much cleverer than me. Seriously, I mean that. It's always kind of a privilege to listen to someone talk about their field because they know so much, and he was able to explain it to me in a way I understood, which says a lot. So yeah, I'll be able to include some of his thoughts and his insight in this episode. So thank you, Adrian. We will get to it later.
Yeah. You were pretty stoked afterwards.
It was incredibly interesting. He even gave me an idea for another episode. We ended up talking about something completely different, which we may get to next season. I'm not very sure. But like even that was interesting because we're getting kind of on a tangent now, but as well as his work into the geology and the sort of the nature of the loch, he also has written or is writing a book on the history of sea serpents through the 18th and 19th, maybe the 19th and 20th centuries. He's literally writing a book. So we got talking about that for ages too, and it was so interesting. I absolutely loved it.
Definitely read that book.
Yeah, I would.
Sounds really good.
But yeah, we ended up talking about something only kind of related to the Loch Ness Monster because he has all of this other knowledge. Well, I want to hear all about that too.
I remember you telling me that at the time, and it was weird to me to think of Nessie, as he's known. As she's known, as a sea serpent. I'm like, oh yeah, that is just so standalone in my head. I'm like, no, it's just Nessie. That's what she is.
It's interesting. Once you get into the stuff like that and the history, that's this whole podcast. So interesting. So interesting. So yeah, we'll get more into what Adrian has to say later in the episode. We're kind of going to talk a bit about the loch itself, and then sort of the history of the monster legend, and then sort of towards the end we'll talk about some theories about what Nessie could actually be. Sound good?
Yes.
Excellent. So before we get into anything, I want to ask you specifically, Kieran. You.
Yes, teacher. I didn't study.
I just want to know, before we go in completely cold, what do you think about Nessie? What are your thoughts before we get in deep?
I saw you smirk before you said it there, but why are you
Just
smirking?
because I wrote it down and I was so happy that I thought of it. But seriously though, what do you think before we get into it? No more puns, I swear.
I think deeply that Nessie did exist at some point. That's what I like to think. That once upon a time, because Loch Ness is pretty enormous, that there was something there that people saw that begun the legend, but there's not anything there now.
Interesting.
That's what I choose to believe. I think what I actually believe is it's just made up. It's just a story.
So you have kind of a conflict in your head of what you would like to be true and what you kind of think is true.
Yeah.
I think that's fair. I think a lot of people think that way. I don't think that's unusual at all.
Because I think that sea serpents are just a good way to kind of represent just the danger of open water.
So kind of like a metaphor.
Yeah. And even...
Well, you know, that's interesting because you come from, like, fishing stock.
Yeah.
People who worked on the sea. It's interesting that you would go that way.
And...
knowing how dangerous the sea can be.
It's a way for, like, almost like a coping mechanism for some people who perhaps had, like, incidents at sea.
Well, you know, we talked about that in the Selkies episode.
Yeah.
That Selkies were a way to cope with losses at sea. It was much nicer to think of them joining the Selkies or becoming one than just being lost.
Yeah, or a way to, like, talk to children about it and things, about warn them of the dangers of the sea and open water. Loch Ness is freshwater, isn't it? It's not connected to the sea.
No.
Or directly, it's got a river.
It is, we'll get into it, but it's connected to the canal.
That's it.
The Caledonian Canal. But it is freshwater.
Yeah. It's not a sea loch.
No, it's not. Which is what Loch Broom is.
Yeah.
Where we come from.
Yeah.
Which is saltwater. But Loch Ness is freshwater.
Yep.
Well, interesting.
Yeah, that's what I think.
That's really funny that's your take on it, given your history. Which I say, but on both sides of my family, like, everyone lived on the sea and on islands and were fishermen.
Well, you know that some of your ancestors were lost at sea and died at sea.
Certainly on my mum's side. My mum had a lot of direct my mum had a lot of direct relatives who died at sea.
Yeah.
A lot of her uncles and things. I don't know the details.
No.
Yeah.
Whereas I don't know of anyone who tragically died at sea. Which is a good thing.
Well, that's what you want.
Yeah.
You just have your dad's lived experience.
Yeah.
Of, like, first-hand accounts or people that he knew.
Yeah.
Well, I've always been enthralled by stories of the monster. And just by the loch. I think the loch is such a unique place that even if you don't believe in the monster, you don't subscribe to that at all, visiting Loch Ness is still worth it. Because it's so unusual. So I'm excited to sink our teeth into the story. Decided to get you back this time.
I'm supposed to make the terrible jokes.
I think those are the only two, and I only put them in because they popped into my head one after the other, and I had to include them.
Because if you provide the terrible jokes and the content, what am I doing here?
Drinking whiskey. So yeah, we're going to talk about the loch, and then we're going to talk about sort of the history of the legend, and then theories. That's roughly how the episode is going to go.
Sounds good.
So Loch Ness, to put it mildly, is freaking massive.
It's very polite.
It's huge. I have some facts to spit at you just now.
Ooh.
It contains 263 billion cubic feet of water.
Cubic feet. That's a lot of water.
263 billion. And that's more than all the lakes, rivers and reservoirs of England and Wales combined.
Oh, wow.
In terms of volume.
Damn.
Loch Ness has more. Isn't that insane?
That is insane.
And this is so much water that when you look at it in terms of the volume, it could hide the entire population of the Earth. In that amount of water.
Grim.
Isn't that insane?
That is insane.
It gave me the shivers when I read that.
Yeah.
And I read that Loch Lomond has more, in terms of like the surface water, it has more surface water, but it has less volume.
Oh, that's interesting.
Oh, excuse me. Loch Ness is almost 40 kilometres long, so about 25 miles. Ish.
Oh yeah, because there's the Loch Ness Marathon.
There is. Popularly attended, apart from the past couple of years. Because of, the plague.
Yeah.
But yeah, about 25 miles. And it effectively helps to cut Scotland in half. The Great Glen runs across the whole country, east to west, and Loch Ness is a part of that. It has really steep sides, very, very deep, and it's part of that just slice through the whole country. It's the second deepest loch in the UK. I thought it was the deepest, but that's not true. Loch Morar, near Malig, is actually the deepest.
Oh, interesting.
And Loch Morar has its own monster legend.
Oh, yeah.
Which we could talk about in another episode. They have I can't remember her name. Morag, I think.
Well, that makes sense.
It has its own monster legends, which Adrian has investigated. We talked a bit about that. But at its deepest point, Loch Ness is over 800 feet deep.
Damn.
Now, you might hear that and be like, oh, cool, that's a number. But if I put it into context for you, on average, the North Sea is around 400 feet deep. Loch Ness is twice that deep.
That's crazy.
Isn't that mental?
That is. I'm reading a book about deep sea divers just now. Shadow divers. That's very interesting.
Do you have the author?
I think I might have it here, actually.
Just because if I find I get annoyed if I have a title of a book and then I don't have the name.
I have it to hand. Shadow Divers by Robert Curson.
Cool.
Curson?
Probably didn't need it, but...
No. Very good book. Recommended. But he's talking about them diving for wrecks and shipwrecks and things. And in the 80s and 90s. And 200 feet is the utmost limit for the most experienced divers. To dive down below 200 feet is just seen as a bit mental. And because in the book they're going down to 230 foot, and they're like, oh, this is almost too deep that we won't be able to get to it. But we're going to try because we're all the top tier of divers. So 800 feet is insane. To
800 feet, and it's
find
not
anything.
It's not 800 feet everywhere.
No,
there's because
it's not a swimming pool.
No, bodies of water don't work that way. The bottom of the ocean doesn't work that way. You have trenches and things. But at its deepest point, which was only discovered it was quite recently, in the 2000s, I think, they discovered the deepest part, and it's 800 feet deep. So you can just imagine how difficult that is to search, study. Very dangerous.
Yeah, because when I was younger, I was like, well, if there was a Nessie there, they would have found him. How could they not have just found him?
But,
that's pretty deep, though.
Pretty deep.
I mean, there's sonar and things, but...
Well, we'll get into that.
Oh.
But because the water is so deep, the water moves... There's a lot of science behind this, but basically there's layers of water in the loch. There's a cold layer and a warm layer. And because it's so deep, the water moves in such a way that means Loch Ness never freezes over. Which a lot of other lochs in Scotland do, because it's fresh water. It gets very, very cold. But Loch Ness never freezes over because it's too deep to freeze.
Damn. That's crazy.
I thought that was pretty cool. Maybe it's just me. But you would look at that, and if you lived hundreds of years ago and you knew that all the lochs freeze over in the winter, and there's this one loch that doesn't freeze, you might look at that and...
It's a bit spooky.
Wonder what's below. Maybe.
Yeah.
But we haven't even started talking about the visibility yet in the loch.
garbage, I imagine.
It is garbage.
Yeah.
Lots of divers have been into Loch Ness, as you'd imagine. And over time, they found that visibility pretty much disappears at about 9 metres down, which is about 30 feet. So that's not very deep.
No.
I mean, deep for a diver, but in terms of
yeah.
the lot, it's not very deep. But you can't see a thing. It's completely dark, completely black. And one of the reasons for this is that there's peat in the water.
I was wondering if it was going to be the peat.
Yes. So I had to actually look up a way to describe what peat is to someone that might not know, because for me, it's just, it's just peat. Like, you know what it is.
It's just a friend of mine.
No. He doesn't like listening to podcasts. He's going to cringe if you tell him that you mentioned him.
He won't know. I didn't use his name. So about peat.
Yeah, so basically, I had to look it up to be able to describe it as if you'd never heard it before, because a lot of people haven't. But basically, it's a type of soil that you find in peat bogs, which makes sense. Mm-hmm. And it's made from partial decomposition of vegetable matter. So it's a specific type of soil that occurs in like boggy land. It's more acidic than regular soil, and you have all of these conditions that basically make this soil different from everything else. And it's a fuel source. You can burn peat. Mm-hmm. And I was going to say, when I was writing this, I was going to say that if you're Scottish, you probably know what peat is and you've probably used it. But that's probably not true. That's probably just my personal experience.
Yeah, I think so. We never used peat growing up.
Well, I don't know if it's like a Highland thing specifically or like an island thing specifically.
I don't know.
I don't know how common it is further afield, further south.
No, it won't be common in cities anyway, because you don't have access to a big bog.
Well, yeah, it was funny. It was interesting writing all this down and then having to think, actually, this isn't just common experience. This is probably kind of Highland or area specific. Yeah. But if you have access to it, generally in years gone by, and currently, it still happens, a family would have their own section of a peat bog. Mm-hmm. You have your own plot and you go up like this time of year and you cut the peats. So you cut out big sections of the peat and you stack it up in a way that it'll dry, and then you can burn these sections of the soil. And it's not good for the environment, because if you're getting rid of all this peat, you're getting rid of important ecosystems. Like, we're kind of learning that now.
Yeah, we're getting, and there's just more people now.
Yeah, and it's using compost a lot, which is part of the problem. Like, using peat compost is bad. But traditionally, you would burn peat on an open fire, and the smell,
it's a nice smell.
Oh, it's such a good smell. It immediately makes me think of my mum's house, because my mum and stepdad have a peat plot, and my stepdad and my sister, which she hated, would go and cut the peats every year and then burn it on the open fire we have in the house, and there's no smell like it.
That's where I know the smell from.
It's gorgeous. Really, really nice. And a little tangent here, and I think you know the story, I can't remember if you were there or not, but a few years ago, my family and I went to Culloden Battlefield, this several years ago, with my granny. And my granny on my dad's side, and she grew up in Skye, in like a super rural part. It was a very small house, and they didn't have power, things like that. And we walked to a pretty quiet bit of the moor. There was nobody else about. We're quite far away from the visitor centre, and my granny smelled the peat in the ground like a bloodhound. Like, she could smell it, and she immediately took her socks and shoes off in the middle of this open moor and stuck her feet into the peat bog, just without flinching. Like, she absolutely loves the smell, and apparently it's good for your skin. She claimed it's good for your skin, good for your feet.
For minerals.
Yeah, I can't speak to that. I have no idea. But I just remember we weren't horrified. We were just kind of laughing. It's very her, but couldn't believe that she did that.
I remember you telling me, because it wasn't like a warm day.
No,
either.
It wasn't. It was like we were coming out of winter, so I think it was like February, March time.
Oh, it's pretty cold to have your feet in water outside.
But immediately, like, without thinking, just straight in and just like padding about in the bog. I was like, what are you doing? So she's even worse than I am for peat. But back to what I was saying. there's a lot of peat in Loch Ness, and peat discolours and darkens the water, which makes it more difficult to see. It makes the water look like it's dirty.
Yeah.
It gives it a kind of brownish orange colour. But it's totally fine, and it's like safe to drink. Apparently it's good for you if you drink water that has peat in it. But that makes it very difficult to dive because you just can't see.
Yeah.
So all in all, Loch Ness is super deep, super cold, super long, and super dark.
Does make exploring it harder.
But it also sounds like the perfect place to find a monster. Doesn't it?
If I was a monster, that's where I'd hide it.
So, I'm going to talk a little bit about Nessie's timeline. And a bit about some of the sightings, but there's so many, I could never talk about them all. If you're interested in this kind of thing, there's plenty of websites that we'll have linked in the show notes that you can go and check out these sightings for yourself. And there's lots of photos and videos. I was talking to you about this earlier. Lots of photos and videos that are supposedly of Nessie that I can try and describe, but you can't see them while I'm talking. So I'm not going to go into huge depth. Because it's annoying to listen to someone talk about something you can't see.
Yeah.
But they do exist. They are out there.
I'm excited to hear when Nessie was first spotted.
Well, to do that, dear Kieran, we once again need to travel back in time.
A journey back. What
are you doing?
A sound effect for us going back in time.
We should ask Cooper.
Yeah, that was the one for a chest opening in Zelda. So we can't.
Oh, was it? That's not what that sounded like. We should ask Cooper to make some going back in time music for us. Well, we're going back in time, and we're going back to around 565 AD.
Oh, damn. That's a lot further back than I expected.
Once again, we're back in the time of the Picts in Scotland. Who we talked about in last week's episode.
We are. So again, we're back to when records began.
Yes.
As the first sighting. Will that make sense?
Yes.
Well, that's exciting. It means it could be even older than that.
And once again, we're with Columba.
Yeah.
On his travels through the Highlands of Scotland, converting the Pictish people to Christianity.
I didn't do my homework.
That's what I asked you to look up. You didn't?
I didn't do any homework.
You did. Well, I mean,
I'm sorry.
Walked past St. Columba's Church in Nairn.
We did.
That's almost the same thing.
Yeah, we talked about it.
Well, in that I pointed it out to you and you went, oh yeah.
Just in general, St. Columba.
Well, yeah, we're back with Columba on his journey through Scotland.
Journey through...
So, he's down by the loch. With his trusty biographer, Adomnan.
Oh yeah.
Remember him? We talked about him. Columba spots a man swimming out in the water.
Oh.
So, enjoying himself, having a good old time. I think this was supposedly in August of that year, but I don't know how they know that. Supposedly in August.
I mean, it might have noted the date, I suppose.
Maybe.
If he's a biographer.
But then, Columba notices a great water beast. So that's a quote. Water beast.
It's a bit rude.
Rise out of the depths of the loch. And Columba's horrified and afraid for the swimmer's safety because he's in the water with this great monster. And Columba knows that he has to act quickly. So what he does is he raises his hand at the monster and he calls out to invoke the name of God. Because remember, he's, I think, a monk at this point. Later he would be made a saint. And he commands the beast to go back with all speed. So that's quotes. And it does.
Oh.
The beast disappears back under the waves and the man in the water is safe. Now, some versions of this are different. Some versions say that the man in the water was actually attacked by the monster, so he was injured. I also read that some accounts say Columba met the beast in the River Ness, not the loch. And that he banished the monster from the river to the loch. That's another version. But it's the same. We've said it before, that when things go back that far, there's all kinds of different versions.
Yeah.
Different translations that lead people to think different things, you know?
And just depends how spicy you want it, doesn't it?
But this, all the way back in 565 AD, is supposedly the very first encounter with Nessie.
Oh, dang.
So it all comes back around. Everything that we talked about, here we are again.
That's a long time. I expected maybe like the 1500s for some reason.
See, I never appreciated how long ago this was, because I knew this was supposedly the first when I was wee. But, you know, I didn't appreciate just how long ago that was. Because it's ancient.
Yeah.
Like, feasibly, that encounter could have been real. And this monster could have lived 100 years and it would still not exist by now.
Oh, yeah. Maybe there's some, like, ancient giant freshwater lobster. Because there's a thought that lobsters can just live indefinitely.
Maybe. Nobody could get him.
Yeah, maybe he's still there.
Maybe.
He's like
Kieran with the hot take.
15 foot long now.
Or are you just hungry?
Snapping about. I mean, I go for lobster. Do you have any?
Only whiskey, I'm afraid.
Only whiskey!
So it seems like whatever Columbus saw in the loch that day, listened to what he said. Because there wasn't another recorded sighting for about 1,000 years.
Oh, dang.
Like, a long time.
That's a long time.
So now we're in the 1500s.
Oh.
Like what you were saying. That's what you expected. Now, if you probably don't remember, but to give you a bit of context, we're in 1527, and this is when the Grants owned Uckert Castle.
Yeah, I was just thinking.
And King James IV is King of Scotland.
So many Jameses.
I know. I try to make it clear, but it's very complicated.
If there's plural, do they become Jamies? Plural of James.
No.
One James, two Jamie.
Or is it just Jame? You don't get two sheeps. But yeah, they own Uckert Castle just now, which is on the banks of the loch, just to kind of... Like, I like tying everything together where I can.
Yeah,
I might be the only one, but I like knowing how things all link together and what's happening at the same time.
Yep.
So the Grants have Uckert Castle. They're probably in the process of building Grant Tower. With me?
Yep, I'm with you.
So in 1527, a man called Duncan Campbell had a startling encounter on Loch Ness. And he said that he saw, quote, a terrible beast, unquote, from the shores of the loch. But that's all I have. That's the only information about the sighting. I couldn't find any more information on him. It's just this entry.
Yep.
I think it's a Nessie sighting register.
Oh, yeah.
That I used for quite a lot of this. That's all that's really given. And this list is extensive. I can't talk about them all. This year alone, 2021, there have been over 1,000 Nessie sightings.
But we couldn't go anywhere for most of 2021.
Well, you can watch the loch from a webcam.
Oh.
So people watch these webcams all over the world, and there have been over... I think in March was the last time I checked. There were over 1,100 sightings.
Wow.
And there was one at the start of this week. It was in the paper.
I suppose if there's been like 1,000, there'll be like several every day.
So
crazy. Do you think we should have it open in the background? Just a little webcam of Nessie.
You would definitely get too distracted to listen to what I have to say.
Say, what? Oh, a bird.
But yeah, you can do that if that's something you're interested in. You can watch the loch from these webcams.
Do you know where people can do that? I mean, if you put in Loch Ness webcam.
Yeah, it should come up. It is a thing, but I can't remember the actual website. It can be in the show notes though.
Yeah.
I'll look it up and it'll be there. I can't remember the actual website. But if you just type in Loch Ness Monster webcam, you'll find it. So yeah, this is why I can't talk about all the sightings, because there's been over 1,000 this year.
And presumably most of them are bogus.
Well, I mean, for some of them, it's just I saw a black lump in the water.
Yeah.
So, I can't list all of them. A lot of the sightings take the same form. It's a black hump or several black humps in the water. Some of them say they're moving quickly. Some of the people say they see a head or a long neck. So they're all fairly similar. But I actually used a site called LochNessSightings.com, which was super helpful because they broke down a lot of the sightings that have happened. So if you're interested in finding out a bit more, have a look at them or the webcam. That's where I would go.
Well, yeah, because it must be hard to debunk sightings when it's just not anything. It's just a lump in the water. Like, well, that could be literally anything.
It's something that I talked about with Adrian, but he was saying that that's kind of the thing with Loch Ness, is that if you have a picture that you can't decide either way, you have a monster. Mm-hmm. That's just the way it goes. If it's difficult to determine what's in it, and it's from the loch, it's the monster. You can't disprove it.
No. It's that thing, is you can't prove it or disprove it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So after this sighting in 1527 from Duncan Campbell, there wasn't really anything else said about the monster in the loch, at least not recorded, for another 300 years.
Oh, wow.
So the legend, like, lots of people locally knew it. It was talked about and, you know, like, passed orally, like, stories were told, but nothing was really recorded for a long time. But then, in 1879, you with me?
I'm with you.
A group of meddling kids spotted something out in the water, which they described as, quote, a small head on a long neck, unquote. And this was near the north shore of the loch.
Okay.
So closer to Inverness than Fort Augustus, which I think is at the other end.
You meddling kids.
Yeah.
That's quite funny, because that's around when the fairy coffins were found, and that was also a group of meddling kids, I think.
Yeah, I think that was the end of the 1800s.
I think so. It's fairly close.
I think so.
In the span of 1500 years, it's pretty close. So we started and finished with meddling kids.
Yeah, it's fitting. Now, this description sounds more like the Nessie you might have in your head already, if you imagine the Loch Ness Monster. The small head on the very long neck.
Yep.
It's the typical Nessie silhouette. But what's interesting is that, I read this on the Loch Ness Sightings website, that after this sighting, the sightings became a lot more regular. But the way they're recorded was really interesting, because they weren't recording it as if there was any kind of surprise or shock. All of the sightings after that were written like everybody knew there was a monster in the loch, so it was only natural that it would be spotted.
That's weird, isn't it?
So there was no, like, horror or intrigue. It was just, oh yeah, someone saw the monster.
Oh my god, there's a monster! Like, yeah, that's Nessie. Well, what's the problem?
Yeah, like, that's what you've seen. Which I thought was really interesting.
That is really interesting.
That it's just kind of matter of fact. Like, oh yeah, you saw the monster in the same way that you saw a seal.
Yeah. And that's again interesting, because 150 years ago could have lived and died.
Well, exactly.
Could have been something there.
Exactly.
I'm trying to think I'll wait till the theories, but like, what animals could live in the loch? We can get to that later, though.
Yes. But it's important to remember that this was still a long time ago. So people didn't see the monster the way that we do in the present day. Back then, the Loch Ness Monster was kind of put together with all the legends that there are of Kelpies, the water horse, which is a creature from Scottish mythology. And at this time, it wasn't even called the Loch Ness Monster. It was a water horse or a Kelpie. That's what it was referred to. So that's what people believed it was.
That's interesting.
So it's changed over time to what is widely believed is in the loch. And I'll mention Kelpies a bit later on when we get to theories. But, you know, we could have a whole episode on them. They quite often get mixed up with Selkie lore.
Yeah, that's what I did.
The Selkies and Kelpies.
I mixed them up. Or combined them.
But yeah, it was just viewed differently.
Yeah. That is strange, isn't it?
I think there was a film called The Water Horse. I think it came out when we were wee.
Maybe.
Can't remember.
Don't know.
But once again, we get to a point in our story where something spooky, unusual, unexpected happens, and the media goes nuts.
Oh, global sensations, here we come.
Nuts for the time.
Yeah.
The media and the newspapers didn't really get a hold of the Nessie story until the 1930s. Which surprised me, because in the Highlands, in the local area, everyone knew about the monster.
Yeah.
It was the local legend, everybody knew it, everybody talked about it, but it was the 1930s that it actually hit the papers for the first time.
That's interesting. It's just so normal.
Yeah.
But little, like, towns and things weren't as well connected for it to travel effectively.
So the first newspaper report of Nessie came out in 1930 in a paper called the Northern Chronicle. And I couldn't tell where this paper was actually released. I couldn't see. And a man called Sandy Gray, along with two other men, were fishing out on the loch. I think he lived in Foyers. And they claimed that after a while they became really confused and they were on alert because they saw a salmon jumping out of the water near the boat. And you might know a bit more about this than me, but apparently, salmon don't just do that all the time. They do it if they're under threat or they're being chased. It's a way for them to get away from a predator.
That makes sense.
Or like jumping upstream, but that's something different.
Well, yeah, I've only ever known them to try and jump up waterfalls and stuff.
Well, like they do it for a reason, basically. They don't just jump around in the water.
They don't do it like dolphins do it.
No. So they believed that the salmon was being chased by something and they couldn't see what it was. So they were looking around the boat to see why the salmon jumped. They're searching, and then the men describe hearing, quote, a terrible noise, unquote, and they saw a great commotion with spray flying everywhere. So something is splashing around close to the boat.
Spooky.
And whatever it was caused a wave that was big enough to make their boat rock. And there's different versions of this story as well. It's reported that the men saw a 6-metre long creature. But other reports don't say that they saw anything. But the belief was, by them and everyone around, that they'd encountered the strange monster, Kelpie, that people had been speaking about and believed in for a long time.
Yeah.
But, surprisingly, nobody paid much attention to this story. It's so weird to think about now because, like, almost every Nessie sighting is in the paper or, like, talked about online. But nobody paid attention to this at all, even though it was in the newspaper.
Well, yeah, whenever there's, like, a half-decent photo, it's in the local papers.
Yeah, but nobody...
Because it's fun.
Nobody paid any attention to it. The first newspaper story that actually gained any kind of traction or notoriety was released in the Inverness Courier, which is still our local paper.
Yep.
And this was released in 1933. So this is 3 years later.
Damn.
And I found the newspaper article.
Did you?
And I can read it to you now if you like.
Yes, please.
Okay. Have some whiskey.
Getting your reading voice ready. I think you haven't been reading this whole time.
I know, which is apparently different to my normal podcast voice. I don't know why.
In today's news.
Right. Here we go. I should say that newspaper writing was very different back then to what you would find in the paper now. So please don't laugh at me. I'm not making this up. This is actually what the article says. And this isn't like I read a scan of the article. Someone has scanned the actual news. This is it. Loch Ness has for generations been credited with being the home of a fearsome-looking monster, but somehow or other, the water kelpie, as this legendary creature is called, has always been regarded as a myth, if not a joke. Now, however, comes the news that the beast has been seen once more, for on Friday of last week, a well-known businessman who lives near Inverness, and his wife, a university graduate, when motoring along the north shore of the loch, not far from Abriacan Pier, were startled to see a tremendous upheaval on the loch, which, previously, had been as calm as the proverbial mill pond. The lady was the first to notice the disturbance, which occurred fully 3/4 of a mile from the shore, and it was her sudden cries to stop that drew her husband's attention to the water. There, the creature disported itself, rolling and plunging for fully a minute, its body resembling that of a whale, and the water cascading and churning like a simmering cauldron. Soon, however, it disappeared in a boiling mass of foam. Both onlookers confessed that there was something uncanny about the whole thing, for they realised that here was no ordinary denizen of the depths, because, apart from its enormous size, the beast, in taking the final plunge, sent out waves that were big enough to have been caused by a passing steamer. The watchers waited for almost half an hour in the hope that the monster, if such it was, would come to the surface again, but they had seen the last of it. Questioned as to the length of the beast, the lady stated that, judging by the state of the water in the affected area, it seemed to be many feet long. It will be remembered that a few years ago, a party of Inverness anglers reported that when crossing the loch in a rowing boat, they encountered an unknown creature, whose bulk movements and the amount of water it displaced at once suggested that it was either a very large seal, a porpoise, or indeed the monster itself. But the story, which duly appeared in the press, received scant attention and less credence. In fact, most of those people who aired their views on the matter did so in a manner that bespoke feelings of the utmost scepticism. It should be mentioned that, so far as is known, neither seals or porpoises have ever been known to enter Loch Ness. Indeed, in the case of the latter, it would be utterly impossible for them to do so, and, as to the seals, it is a fact that though they have on rare occasions been seen in the River Ness, their presence in Loch Ness has never once been definitely established.
That's definitely how papers today should be written.
Oh, I know. Denizens of the depths.
I know, right? In the simmering froth. Like, oh.
The boiling mass of foam.
That's amazing.
It's just, you're so crunched for just words and space now. You'd never get that, but it was a joy to read.
That was thoroughly enjoyable. And that's interesting, because that addressed two of my thoughts.
What were your thoughts?
About porpoises and seals. I was like, I thought they were saltwater. I don't think they could get into the loch. But recently-ish, the past few years, there were dolphins in the River Ness. I was like, that's quite funny. Maybe one somehow made it up, but then it'd be in freshwater. So it's funny they said that's what they thought. And then it doesn't happen, except they've been seen in the river. Like, eh.
Well, seals have been seen in the loch.
Oh, have they? Mm-hmm. Oh, that's interesting. That seals the deal on that theory.
Ugh. Kieran, stop it. So yeah, that's the article. And this is the article that started all of the Nessie mania that we know today.
Well, it was so well written. How can you not be captivated by that story?
And I didn't mention them in the article, but the couple were called Mr. and Mrs. Mackay, and they were from Drumnadrochit, which is a town pretty close to the loch. I don't know why it doesn't... I don't know whether they asked maybe to not be named.
Maybe.
But that's who it was. And yeah, some of the details that they thought to include were pretty interesting. Like saying that she was a university graduate and he was a well-known businessman. They really paint them out to be reliable and trustworthy.
Not local whack job sees monster.
Well, you see, it mentions the encounter before. It talks about the anglers and how nobody really cared.
Yeah, that's interesting.
So yeah, I thought it would be interesting to include that.
Yeah.
And that's available online. Like, you can look at that yourself.
That's really cool.
We'll include a link. I have it. But it was after this article was released that the creature went from being the water kelpie to the Loch Ness Monster. Now, I saw in most places that the Inverness Courier was the first paper to coin the term Loch Ness Monster. But the Press and Journal, or the Aberdeen Press and Journal, which it was then, has also claimed to be the one who used Loch Ness Monster for the first time. So
both could be true.
A proper historian could clear that up. I'm just going to say that both have said that they're the originator of the term.
Yeah, and they might have originated it separately. So.
Maybe. Quite likely it could have, but both have said it, and it's a pretty big claim to fame, so I thought I should mention both.
It is, for what seems so obvious. Like, the monster that's seen Loch Ness. Oh, Loch Ness Monster. Has nobody used that before?
But you wouldn't say that if it already had a name. If you knew it was a kelpie, you would call it a kelpie, wouldn't you?
Loch Ness kelpie.
So lots of other media outlets became interested in the story once this was released, including the BBC.
Oh, wow.
And the BBC was just starting out at this time, but they picked up on the story and they broadcast it to loads of new people who wouldn't have known about it before. So after this, sightings went up. Sandy Gray, who was one of the fishermen that I mentioned earlier, he encountered Nessie again while he was working as a bus driver in 1933.
I mean, what's Nessie doing in the middle of a road? That's what I want to know.
What's Nessie doing on the back of the bus? He reported seeing something that lots of people who take drives around the loch in the years after would report seeing. He says he saw a large black shape moving through the water extremely fast. Like, he said that it was keeping pace with the bus and he couldn't overtake it, so he couldn't drive faster than it. And once again, his encounter made the papers. But it was after this that Sandy decided that he was going to try and catch the monster. That was his plan.
He had an awfully big net.
Well, he thought about it. He was a pretty avid salmon fisherman. And he was generally catching fish that were like 10 pounds in weight. So from what he saw of the monster, he guessed that it was probably about 3,000 pounds in weight, which is roughly 1,360 kilos.
Damn.
That's what he thought.
Over a ton. That's a lot. That's very big.
The Aberdeen Press and Journal reported his plans to catch the monster, and it said, realising that such a fish would require something stronger than the conventional fishing outfit, Mr. Gray has had special tackle made.
Well.
Because duh. Now, a lot of this didn't make sense to me, but you have done fishing before, so you might have a better idea.
I have done some fishing.
But apparently he had this made, and it was a sealed barrel, which was attached to about 50 yards of wire to some heavy-duty treble hooks baited with dogfish and skate. That's how they described it.
I mean, a heavy-duty hook, it's got to be like as long as your arm.
I really don't know. But Sandy said that basically the barrel was supposed to disappear if the monster took the bait, and then it would reappear, and that's how he would know something was on the hook.
Yeah, it's because you normally have like the little float, the little orange float. Then your hooks come off of that.
Well, that was his plan.
The bobber. So it's just a very big version, isn't it?
Yep. It's better than Charlie Sheen. Charlie Sheen tried this in 2013. Did he? Yes, and he went out on the water with a bottle of whiskey and a hook. With a rope on it. That's what he did.
Oh no.
So, you know, he's more prepared than that.
That's true.
At least he's not drunk.
I was maybe, hopefully. I was hoping for Kevin Costner in Waterworld situation, where he drops a giant hook and then he's the bait. You know, he jumps in and he's like splashing in a certain way.
I mean, that's not safe.
Effective though. Kevin Costner's fighting Waterworld.
Well, unfortunately for Sandy, his attempt to catch Nessie didn't work. He didn't catch the monster, and he never tried it again. He only tried that once and never went back out. But he wasn't the only believer in Nessie in his family. His younger brother was a guy called Hugh, and he actually claimed that he had managed to take a picture of the Loch Ness Monster in November of 1933. A couple of months after Sandy's hunt for the monster, and he sent this photo to the Daily Record in Glasgow.
Do you think it was in selfie mode accidentally?
I don't think you could be in selfie mode accidentally in 1933.
Just holding a mirror in front of him.
I think his double chin. Now, this was taken very seriously. He gave a sworn statement that he had taken the photograph honestly, it hadn't been tampered with in any way. His character was vouched for by the local magistrate in a letter. So he vouched for him, saying that he was trustworthy, reliable, everything. And Hugh's photograph and the existence of the monster was debated in Parliament. That's how seriously it was taken.
Damn.
Kodak, the camera company...
Oh, yeah.
They even signed off on the photograph being authentic. They confirmed that the negative couldn't have been tampered with.
Damn.
So they went to all these different people to confirm that this was the case.
That's part of what they're going... Loch Ness, where's that? Scotland, where's that?
Oh, we don't care about that.
It's part of the country you govern. Nah.
I don't believe it. Isn't that insane?
That is wild.
So, 33 and 34 are kind of a period of absolute Nessie madness. There was a reward put out for Nessie's capture by a man called Bertram Wagstaff Mills.
That's a name.
Well, he was nicknamed Britain's Circus King. So he was a big deal. He had all of these shows and circuses, and you know, this was at a time where circuses had live animals.
Yeah.
That they were treated, which is completely wrong, shouldn't be done now. That's just the way it was back then. It was deemed acceptable. He wanted Nessie for his circus. He wanted to display her and sell tickets. And they built a huge steel cage so that if she was captured, they would be able to transport her to London, which is where he wanted to exhibit the monster.
Seems unnecessary.
No. Sigh. But it annoys me how that's so common. It's, oh yes, we're going to go to this place and we're going to take some of the local wildlife or local culture and we're going to cage it up, package it up, and bring it to London, and that's where it's going to stay.
Yep, it's pretty classic, isn't it? What's funny is King Kong, because that's what they do in King Kong, was released in the 30s.
It was, and it is kind of... It's considered that could have fed into the hype around Nessie, because there's dinosaurs in that. There's dinosaurs in King Kong.
Oh, yeah. I've not seen the original one.
So I don't think it's coincidence. I'm pretty sure I talked to Adrian about that, actually. He was saying that it's feasible that there could be a link, that people were seeing this movie for the first time and then hearing about this legend in the loch. But yeah, that you can see pictures. There was a giant steel cage made. Like, he invested a lot. He even insured the reward. Like, he had insurance to make sure he would get all of his costs back and stuff. It's insane.
That is insane. Did anybody claim it?
No.
So walk up and say, "That, sir, that's a salmon." This is what you're looking for, me.
That's an elephant.
This is a dead parrot.
So I'm going to skip ahead now to 1934. So the year after. And we are going to talk about one of the most famous Nessie sightings ever.
Ooh.
That ever happened. At this time, a filmmaker called Duke Wetherill, I think Duke was a nickname. I think his name was actually Marmaduke. I think I read that.
Amazing.
Duke Wetherill. He was living by the loch and he was determined to find the monster. Like that was going to be his goal. He wanted to capture it on film. Very King Kong. Like, he was there with like his camera crew and wanted to film the monster. And he'd been unsuccessful. So far, all he'd managed to find was a big footprint, which he had taken a plaster cast of. And this was his pride and joy. He had this plaster cast.
What if he accidentally found a Sasquatch? You're not what I'm looking for. Get out of here.
We're not talking about you right now, Mr. Squat.
Whoa.
So in 1934, the Daily Mail printed an extraordinary photograph at the same time, taken by a man called Robert Kenneth Wilson, who was a surgeon from London. And from then on and to the present day, this photo is referred to as the surgeon's photo or the surgeon's photograph. And you've probably seen it. It's really famous. If you've ever looked at anything to do with the Loch Ness Monster, you've seen this photo.
Is it the one that looks just kind of like a sock puppet coming out of the water? With like the little long neck and stuff?
So it shows a small head on a long neck sticking out of the water. And the creature is seemingly like kind of sitting in the water, just kind of sitting there. And everyone was obsessed because it was so clear and you knew exactly what you were looking at. You could tell that this was the monster. And it only fed into the legend and the mania. So more people turned up, like Duke Wetherill at this time. He was really angry.
I bet he was pissed.
And the area around the loch saw a huge uptake in the number of tourists and people who wanted to visit the loch because people wanted to see the monster. It wasn't just the locals who knew about this anymore. It had travelled, globally, I think, by this point. Now, there was this huge spike of interest in Nessie in 33 and 34, like I said. But the fad was kind of dissipating in 1935, which was unfortunate for Sandy Gray. Remember him?
Yep.
Because he supposedly saw the monster again in 1935 for an extended period of time. So he claimed that, quote, "The head and neck appeared, rising from 18 inches to 2 feet out of the water. Behind, I saw quite plainly a series of what appeared to be small ridges, 7 in number, apparently belonging to the tail of the creature, which now and again caused much commotion in the water. The head was like a horse's, but not as large as that of a horse. It was rather small in relation to the huge body, which was of a slaty black colour. From the way the creature moved in the water, I have not the slightest doubt that it was extremely heavy. In moving, it gave a sort of lurch forward, which seemed to carry it about 4 yards at a time." Unquote. And there were a couple of people with Sandy that day who claimed to have watched the monster with him like this for 25 minutes. 25 minutes. And on top of that, 16 people reported seeing almost exactly what Sandy says he saw the day after.
Oh.
But once again, nobody cared because the craze was over.
Wow.
So that's twice that he's literally missed the boat. Before and after.
It's just a shame.
I know.
Poor Sandy.
And it only gets worse.
Oh no. For him or in general?
For him.
Oh.
Because it's quite spooky. Like, it's not strictly related, but I wanted to mention it because it's just one of those weird coincidences.
Mm-hmm.
In 1949, Sandy drowned in Loch Ness. Oh. He went out on a fishing trip and he got into trouble in some bad weather. And his body washed up on the shore a couple of days after. Oh. So he spent his whole life living by the loch, trying to prove that this monster existed, and then he died on the loch.
Oh man.
How spooky is that?
That is very spooky. He got literally devoured by the myth.
Mm-hmm.
God.
I know. Just weird. It's one of those weird things. In 1938, so this is 3 years after Sandy's last encounter.
Yep.
A local policeman, a chief constable, no less, which is a big deal. He was called William Fraser. He got so concerned about people hunting for the monster and the possibility that it would be found that he wrote a letter to the Scottish Office of Parliament. Now remember, there's no Scottish Parliament then. That was 99, I think.
Yes.
That Scotland got its own parliament. So this is to the Scottish Office of the UK Parliament, which is different. And he wrote a letter demanding protection for the monster.
Oh, wow.
So although the mania had kind of died down, people were still coming to the loch and they were determined to catch the monster and possibly kill it.
Yeah.
And he didn't believe he would be able to stop them if that came about. Since some of them were turning up with like harpoons, but there's not really much he can do against that. He felt that Nessie deserved protection. In the letter he said that there is a strange creature in Loch Ness seems now beyond doubt, but that police have power to protect it is doubtful. So he was worried.
Yeah.
He wrote a letter expressing his concern, and I'm pretty sure they talked about it in Parliament.
Fair play.
About what they would do to protect the monster.
Oh, this gentle sea creature. Let's kill it and find it!
There's always someone.
There's
always someone that ruins it.
We'll band together and we'll kill it. I'm like, why? Because then we'll have it as a trophy.
Oh, excellent.
So we don't know it exists until it's dead in front of us. I'm like, well, why not catch it alive and then release it?
It's like that horrible dentist who killed that lion, remember? A couple of years ago.
Oh, yes, Cecil the lion.
Mm-hmm. It's like that. Like, why would you do that?
Yeah.
What a horrible thing to do. Jumping ahead. In 1951, a man called Lachlan Stewart, not E-W-U-A. I can see your face.
Oh.
You okay?
I clicked my neck.
Oh no. He claimed to have taken a picture of Nessie from his croft, which was opposite Ucker Castle.
Oh, okay.
So on the other side of the water. And I've seen the photo. In the photo, you can see 3 distinct black humps in the water. And the photo was verified by important zoologists at the time.
Oh, yeah.
They believed it was genuine. They just couldn't explain what it was they were looking at. They basically just confirmed that it was a creature.
How though?
I don't know. I'm not a zoologist.
No, how would you... Carry on.
And it wasn't long after that the first sonar readings were taken from the loch, which you mentioned earlier. So sonar has been used quite a lot to even just like map the animals that are in the loch rather than just the monster.
I remember being younger and then like they did the first full sonar of the whole loch at once.
I remember that.
And they didn't find the monster. That's what they were talking about.
It's very upsetting.
I know.
See, I don't think anyone who didn't grow up in and around the loch understands the pain of finding out that people are actually searching for Nessie, but then they don't find anything.
Yeah.
It's both the best and the worst feeling.
I remember being very above it. I'm like, oh, it's so stupid.
Really?
Of course there's no monster.
Oh, I was fully immersed. I believed it 100%.
No, I was just sceptical. Just be like, meh.
We went on the Jacobite cruises on a school trip when I was in primary school,
yeah?
and I was I would have bet money that I was going to see it that day. I was determined I was going to see it, even if nobody else did. Come
on, tell the truth. How old were you? 17, 18?
No, I was like 10. Here we go. So the first sonar readings, this is in 1954.
Okay.
So the crew are doing all their readings using their equipment, and they notice that something very large was managing to keep up with the boat. But it was almost 150 metres below the surface of the water. So about 500 feet. I feel like, I don't know, some people understand metres better than feet. I feel like I need to say both.
You've been flip-flopping between like nobody's business.
Now, I'll talk a bit more about scientific exploration of the loch later when I get into what me and Adrian talked about, because he talked at length about that. But this was the first, from what I could see, this is the first use of sonar in Loch Ness, and they had interesting results that they couldn't explain. That's probably the fairest way to say it. And it's after this, in the 50s, that lots of video footage claiming to show the monster swimming or moving around in the loch, or even just appearing on the surface, was starting to be released by lots of different people. So there's loads of names, loads of different people who've submitted footage. There was a big one in the 60s, I think, released by a man called Tim Hinsdale. But I'm not going to get too into all of that here because you can't see what I'm talking about.
Yeah, and if there's just endless ones.
But this footage does exist. You can find it. A lot of them are online. You can look at these.
Be a good deep dive on YouTube.
Absolutely, yeah. In 2000, so we're...
I know, we're getting there.
Yeah. An 18-minute video was taken. That's
a long one.
That supposedly captured Nessie. And on the website that I saw them talking about this, they were saying that for the Loch Ness Monster, or just monsters generally, that's like a feature film to have 18 minutes. And then in 2007, so 7 years later, a video was released to the BBC that apparently showed a black object moving really quickly through the water in the loch. But both of the films couldn't be proven to be the monster. The usual. Now there's one photo in particular which, it's absolutely bizarre. The whole story behind it is so strange. But it's taken by a man called Anthony Doc Shields. And he claims to be a magician and a psychic. And he says that he summoned the monster out of the water with magic powers.
Okay.
And he claims to have done this all over the country with lots of different monsters and lochs and lakes and all that fun stuff. But he also claimed to get a picture of Nessie, which he published with the Daily Mirror, and it was put on the front page.
Oh, yeah.
It was a big deal. But I've seen the photo, and it's just...
Is it just a nothing?
It's not... No, it's not real. It's not. It looks like an inflatable balloon type thing. But you can see the neck and the head out of the water. And there's like... It looks like an elephant trunk. That's what it looks like. And then that's what he said later on. He said that this wasn't actually a photo of Nessie. He didn't summon the Loch Ness Monster. He summoned an elephant squid.
An elephant squid?
An elephant squid. And that this photo he had taken was of part of the squid. And the reason it looked like an elephant trunk is because that's what elephant squids look like.
That's unusual.
Yeah. I don't think it's real.
No. I remember being, I think I said this in a different episode, really obsessed with giant squid.
I think everyone has a little phase because they're so unusual.
Yeah, and like one hadn't been seen alive and stuff, and they'd appear like in people fishing nets and be like, holy shit, that's a big ass squid.
Well, this isn't the same as a giant squid.
No, this
is an elephant squid.
While I didn't believe in the Loch Ness Monster, I was all about giant squid.
I mean, they are real. They've been proven.
Squids? Squy. Squiddies.
But the reason I talk about this photo in particular is because it brings me to a really important part of the Nessie story, which is all of the hoaxes.
Oh, yeah.
Because, and I saw it in a couple of different websites, that the hoaxes are just as important to the story as the things we can't explain. And the science. They've become such a huge part of the story. You can't not talk about them.
I suppose as part of the story.
Yeah, just like part of the tale. So I was a little bit dishonest before.
What?
I was lying through omission.
This is actually not about the Loch Ness Monster.
Well, let's revisit the world famous, iconic surgeon's photo, shall we? That amazing photo that went all over the world.
Yep.
You remember? Well, it took 60 years.
60?
Yeah, 60.
Damn.
But in 1994, it came out that the photo was a fake. So remember, I mentioned that filmmaker, Duke Wetherell.
Just him finally getting his own back. He's like an 80-year-old man.
Well, he'd been unsuccessful in capturing Nessie on film.
Actually.
And he was fed up. And he basically decided that he would both prove everyone wrong by showing that the monster exists and also carry out a huge prank on everybody. Basically because he was embarrassed. His ego was seriously bruised. Because remember, I told you about the footprint that he had.
Oh, yeah.
That he got the plaster cast off. And he took that round and showed it to everyone as proof that the monster existed. Well, it definitely wasn't Nessie. Because someone who lived locally... they took an umbrella stand from their house and used it to make the footprint... Because for some reason, the bottom of this umbrella stand was made out of a hippopotamus foot.
God.
So they took that down and made the footprint. And then he saw it, believed it was 100%, and that was his proof. And then he found out that had happened, and he was very embarrassed.
You'd feel so bad, because you'd think that was hilarious, and then do it, and then find out someone's just like...
Well, you know what, part of me believes that if they knew that this filmmaker was there, they did it deliberately to get him. I would definitely believe that. So he was very red-faced. So what he did was he convinced his son-in-law, a man called Christian Sperling, to sculpt a model of the monster for him. And it's Sperling who eventually came out with the truth in the 90s when he was an old man. He's the one who revealed the story. So Sperling sculpted a little monster with the long neck and the head for Wetherell, and they attached it to a toy submarine. And the submarine went out into the water and it floated. And once it was all set up, they just took the photo.
Well, that's good, isn't it?
So that was it. No monster, just a toy submarine and some clay. But you might be thinking, it wasn't Wetherell or Sperling that released the photo.
I was thinking it was the clay is silent. That's what I was thinking.
It was Robert Wilson, the surgeon. Remember?
Yeah.
It's the surgeon's photo. So where does he come in? Well, Wilson was a friend of the two men who was apparently completely up for and keen to take part in the joke.
Oh, yeah?
He was just completely in. So they all decided that Wilson would be the best person to release the photograph because he was a surgeon and he would be the most respected and trusted.
Yep.
Which was absolutely true because he was.
Yep.
Can you believe that?
Cheeky bastards.
So this world famous photo that everybody saw and believed was a complete fake. Completely made up.
Amazing. That's so funny. I remember there was a stone circle in someone's farm. In someone's farm, and I was like, oh my god, how did it get here? This is so weird. We don't recognize this from anywhere. And he had archaeologists come, and it was a year or two in when he had to go oh, I'm really sorry, I just built this. I just thought it would be funny, and we'd get some tourists in.
God,
you're here to dig it all up now, and to yeah, this was me.
That must be so embarrassing.
I know, I
to get that far.
I took it too far. I'm sorry.
Oh. Well, remember the Lachlan Stewart photo I told you about? That was taken opposite Uckert Castle.
Do I remember that photo? Yes.
Well, it's also thought to be a hoax. Now, I don't think he ever fessed up to it, but it's the one that's the three humps quite near the shore of the loch. And it's basically just been debunked by lots of people. It's widely believed that what he did was he wrapped hay bales in black plastic and had them out in the water to look like humps. And you can kind of see it, knowing that it's a hoax photo, the humps don't line up. Because they're floating independently of each other, they're all at different places.
Yeah.
But this one was particularly embarrassing for the zoologists who had come out to say that this is definitely genuine. And it definitely wasn't.
Oh, well, see, there was me being how would you verify that? Because you're just looking at it and being yep. Based on what? Intuition.
So yeah, a bit of egg on their face, I think. Now, there was a hoax photograph released as recently as 2013. So, I say recent, but it's actually not.
I mean, it's fairly recent.
George Edwards is the skipper of the Jacobite Cruises boat.
Oh, yeah.
The one I just talked about. If you don't know, you can take a boat tour around the loch, and it's Jacobite Cruises. He's the skipper, and he's been working out in the loch for a long time. Remember I said that there's the deepest part of the loch is 800 feet.
Yep.
And it was discovered fairly recently.
Yep.
He discovered it.
Oh.
It's called Edwards Deep.
Not Edward's Trenchfoot.
No, Edwards Deep. He discovered it. So he's been on the loch a long time, and he's really involved in all the work that happens there, all the research, and all the tourism. Like, that's a big part of his job, and he's done a lot for the area.
Fair play.
He released a photo of Nessie in 2013, and it was seen all over the world. It was one of those ones that just got picked up straight away, went viral, and everybody saw it, and it was a big deal. But then he did what your guy did, and basically admitted himself that he'd faked the photo for a laugh, basically. He said, I think he's pretty chill about it. From what I see, he said that he was quite happy to join the rogues gallery.
Oh, yeah.
Was how he put it, along with the surgeon, that he just did it for fun. But yeah, he outed himself as having faked it.
Yeah. Oh, it must be hard. Yeah, especially if it happened that you made the photo and then just emailed it to some friends, being like, oh, guys, check it out, I took this photo today. As you're like, oh, wow, yeah, that's really funny. And then it gets passed along until someone believes it, and it just...
Well, what I was thinking was all it would take would be posting it on your personal Facebook page.
That's true, yeah. And you could even post it on your Facebook being like, oh, check out this joke photo I took. But it'll just get passed on and fall out of context.
Yeah. So yeah, that's what he did, and that's what he admitted to.
Oh, man. That's a tough one.
What? But there's even a couple of sightings that happened over the years which were unintentionally fake, which I'll explain. In 1969, The Private Life of Sherlock Holmes was filmed at the loch. It was a movie. And they built a huge, big Nessie model to use in the film.
Oh, yeah.
And when they were finished with it, superbly, like, what even is the environment even? They sunk the model into the loch. So people have claimed to take these like underwater photos that definitely have the monster in them, but it's this model that they used for the film. And they don't know, because why would you?
Oh, man.
I can't remember if it's been recovered or not.
I hope not.
I'm not sure. I can't remember if it was taken out of the loch again.
It might be a little fish, in, like
Maybe.
when they sink ships on purpose to create little marine life areas.
I can't remember. I need to look it up. And then again, in the 1990s, so much later, a whiskey advert was being filmed at the loch. I didn't find which whiskey. And the team who were filming it built just a head and a neck to stick out of the water, rather than a whole big thing.
Efficient.
But what they did before, because they knew what would happen, they put out notices and warnings ahead of time, you know, like in and around Drumnadrocket and all the places.
All the places you'd sight and visit.
Saying, we are shooting an advert, we have a monster that's going to be in the water, don't panic, it's not real, this is what's going on. But people didn't care. People lost their minds anyway. It was being filmed just down from the Clansman Hotel in Drumnadrocket.
Drove past that.
And so many people saw it and believed that they had seen the real Loch Ness Monster when they absolutely didn't.
Yeah, that's a shame. When they've done their best, like, no, like, we're not doing the thing. We're gonna like come out and say, like, we're doing this today. Nobody panic. It's fine. And then everybody panics.
Yeah, they tried. They did their best.
Especially if you're having a few beers.
Yeah, but can you imagine being like a kid?
That'd be the best.
Because I think if I was a parent of a child and saw that out in the water, I would fully let them believe that they'd seen it.
Yeah.
I wouldn't say a word.
You probably said that yourself and like, what?
Yeah, probably.
What am I smoking?
So these are fun examples. These are mistakes that have just kind of happened. But for a lot of people, the hunt for Nessie is very real. And they've been pursuing scientific evidence and have spent a good chunks of their lives looking into this phenomenon in the loch. Lots of different people have spent years working, living on the loch, gathering information and evidence to try and help back up this claim that there's something in the water. One man in particular is Steve Feltham, or Feltham, Feltham. And he's been holding a vigil at the loch for the past 25 years.
I think it was his 25th anniversary recently. He was in the paper.
He's dedicated a good chunk of his life to this. And he's searching for Nessie evidence. He's determined that he's going to find it. He's going to find out what's going on. He's going to find the monster. And there's also, or there was, the Loch Ness Phenomena Investigation Bureau.
Had to be a bureau.
Yeah. But they studied the loch for 10 years, between 1962 and 1972. And what they did during this time was they tried to encourage as many people as they possibly could just to photograph and film the loch from every angle.
Oh, yeah.
That's what they wanted. They felt that that was going to be the best way they were going to catch something. And the Bureau had over 1,000 members. So it was a big deal while it was running. They had a good amount of sway. And, you know, they were committed. It was some people's job.
That's bizarre. I've never even heard of that.
And, like, there's lots of other groups. These are just a couple.
The key players.
And like I said earlier, sonar has been used multiple times in the loch to try and explore it and get a better idea of what's happening in the deep. I'm pretty sure it was because of sonar that we learned that there's Arctic char living really deep in the loch.
Oh.
So some people felt like that could be a possible food source for a monster because these fish are living at a really low depth.
That's really cool. I had Arctic char for dinner when we went to Iceland, the country.
Well remembered. A lot of the sonar contacts that have been made over the years, people have claimed that these contacts are consistent with each other and consistent with showing the existence of a large animal, but it's impossible to say. But I will say that when I was speaking to Adrian for our interview, he was saying that it's very difficult to get any kind of proof using sonar. And I'll get into it a bit more later. But he doesn't really hold much to all of the sonar contacts that people claim show the monster. So it's just that thing. I feel like I'm flip-flopping all the time between here's this compelling evidence, but here's someone who doesn't believe in it at all.
Yeah, it's weird. With sonar, because I've been on my uncle's boat, recreational fishing, and he has sonar to try and find the fish and stuff. And it's weird, because if you go too fast, it doesn't work. But if you're going slowly and something goes under, it's quite weird, because this big mass of, it looks like a heat on a heat map appears. And if you've got hooks in the water, they all start bouncing, because it's a big shoal of fish come past.
It must be bizarre.
But then again, you're like, oh, someone just swam past. What was that? Pretty weird. And in that Shallow Divers book, they find this mysterious underwater thing. Because they're explorers and they want to find, new wrecks. That's the dream, because they're all starting to have been found. So it's often fishermen who find them, because fish congregate over these things. And using sonar, they see, oh, there's something at the bottom. I don't know what. And if they're pally, they'll give it to some divers to then check out. And it's almost always, this is off the coast of New Jersey, rocks or sunken garbage barges. Because you don't know what it is, it's just a mass. And it's often a pile of rocks. But they use the sonar to find where it is, and then they drop an anchor to attach to it, that they then dive down and attach it properly and check it out.
Well, there you go.
So there you go. That's my 2 sonar-related anecdotes.
Well, this kind of brings us up to the present day in terms of the Nessie legend. There was a DNA survey done in 2018, which I'll talk about in a bit, which is very interesting. But what do you think so far, from what I've said?
Am I compelled? I mean, I didn't know the stories of rocking the boat and splashes and waves and stuff. They're pretty cool. I want to believe them, but I'm just but It's just not a monster.
There's that barrier in your brain, I think.
Yeah.
That you just can't get past.
No, because it would have been found or would have been seen.
I know for a long time people believed that if there was a monster, it was living in caves, like on the edge of the loch. That was a theory.
I read a kid's book based on that
Did
theory.
You?
Yeah.
I think it was a theory. I think some people believe that was the case.
So underwater caves.
Mm-hmm. But now we can start getting into the theories as to what the Loch Ness Monster actually is. And there's so many, like, even in this I couldn't have them all because there's no end to the number of theories. But opinions have changed a lot as time has progressed. So it's interesting when you get into some of the what-ifs to see how people's minds have changed. And again, talked about it with Adrian, but he made the point that as time has gone on and our understanding has grown, we've changed our beliefs so that we can still accommodate the thought that there might be a monster.
Oh, yeah.
So, as you believe that, you know, kelpies aren't real, so it's not a kelpie, it's a dinosaur. You make room in your beliefs to still accommodate the monster. You don't stop believing in it.
Yeah, that's
it just changes, which I thought was very well put.
Yeah.
So I mentioned near the start of my story, but an early theory was that the monster was a kelpie or a water horse. And if you don't know, kelpies are creatures from Scottish folklore that look a lot like horses, but they live in bodies of water. And they're generally seen as evil creatures. They're not very nice. They basically lure people to climb on their back. And once they have someone on their back, they turn back into the water and they drown them. And that's the legend. So that was the initial belief. That was the initial belief when it came to Nessie. And there were lots of stories and sightings of water horses years and years ago, and most of them come from Loch Ness. So that was sort of the first theory.
Yeah. I wonder if there were wild horses, normal horses, around Loch Ness.
I mean, I believe it.
Yeah.
It's definitely not
beyond the realm of possibility.
No, not at all. Even as people who kept horses.
Oh yeah, that as well. Because if you saw, like, a breed of horse totally different to horses you were familiar with in the water, just like paddling essentially, you'd just be like, what the fuck is that?
Well, I mean, even if you just saw a horse swimming.
Oh yeah.
You might not necessarily immediately know what it was. So yeah, that was sort of the first theory, but it's not really a modern theory.
No.
Times have changed. Another theory which you've probably heard is that Nessie is a plesiosaur. Plesiosaur.
Is that the ones with the big bodies and then the long neck and the little fins?
Yes, so it's a type of marine dinosaur which is extinct because the dinosaurs are extinct.
Or is it?
But the main reason for this theory is that the description of the monster matches what a plesiosaur would have looked like. So it has the small head and a really long neck, a big wide body, and long flippers.
Yes, yep.
Which are all features a plesiosaur had.
Yeah.
So they match.
It's also kind of like a lapras.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like a lapras. Yeah, you know.
Yeah.
It seems very unlikely. I don't know how you feel about this theory.
Well, I'm in on the it's a lapras theory. Yeah, it seems unlikely. When, like, with the scale of how old dinosaurs are, like, there wouldn't be one. And if there were two, they'd just be incest forever and then die out that way, or just... No, there needs to be lots of them for them to exist.
Well, it's interesting you saying about a lapras. Because the famous Scottish geologist, Hugh Miller, he discovered a fossil on the banks of Loch Ness in the 1800s. And it's a lot smaller. It's like maybe the size of like your open hand kind of thing. But it had similar features to how we would imagine a plesiosaur like Nessie. But what reminded me of Lapras is that apparently this creature had an armoured shell.
Oh.
Like Lapras has. It has a complicated Latin name, which I'm not going to say, but it includes Miller in the name because he discovered it, which I thought was pretty cool. But the fossil is nicknamed Pessy. It's the Pessy Fossil. And the people who work at the Inverness Museum rediscovered this fossil in their what must be magical archives that they have in the museum. They rediscovered it in 2015.
I was just wondering where is it now?
Yeah, it's at the museum. You can go see it. And I don't know how much truth there is to it, but basically they've claimed that if you look at the features of this fossil and took that over time and imagined how a creature like that might evolve, it would look the way that people describe having seen Nessie. So it's kind of half proof, kind of not.
Yeah.
You know? It's difficult to say. But that's interesting even without the Nessie legend, that they found this fossil.
That's really cool.
Of this, that was living there. And it looked kind of like a plesiosaur and had an arm and shell.
And kind of like a lapras.
Yeah.
That's fun.
An issue of New Scientist, which came out back in 2006, made the point that plesiosaurs wouldn't have been able to lift their huge, big, long necks out of the water the way that people have claimed to see Nessie do.
Oh!
It would have been impossible because they were so long and so heavy, it wouldn't have been able to do that. So a plesiosaur couldn't have been spotted the way that people claim.
Yeah.
So that was another argument for not being a plesiosaur.
That's interesting.
And there's other arguments that, like what you said, the loch isn't old enough for plesiosaurs to have lived in it or be living in it, because like lands and lochs and mountains form over time.
Oh yeah.
So the loch, as we understand it, was formed, I think, like 10 or 20,000 years ago. And the plesiosaurs are older than that. So there's that argument. And plesiosaurs aren't fish. They didn't breathe underwater. So if Nessie were a plesiosaur, she would potentially be spotted several times a day because she would have to come up for air.
I've been wondering about that, as it being a mammal as opposed to a fish.
Well, that was part of the cave argument, I think, was that there's little pockets of air.
Yeah.
So that a monster wouldn't have to come to the surface.
So I wonder if this plesiosaur then just popped its head out, kind of like a dolphin.
I don't know.
Must have. I imagine that if it did come all the way out the water, it would look like a giraffe wearing a very heavy hat.
I imagine if it couldn't lift its neck, it must have just spent most of its time largely underwater.
Yeah, it must have been just like...
And just came up for breath.
Yeah, or maybe had a blowhole.
I don't think they had blowholes.
No, just like, just poked its head out and went...
I thought that was interesting.
Yeah.
So, there's lots more complicated and in-depth detail, which I'm not going to get into because I'll get it wrong. I'm trying. I'm doing my best. But this happens all the time in all the reading I had, that there's theories that people really believe in and stand by and they have all this evidence, but then there's people who take these theories and come out with as many reasons not to believe it as the people who believe it.
Naturally.
And then there's rebuttals to the people who are disproving the theory with all of this new information. It becomes a big mess.
A constant battling back and forth.
Yeah, pretty much. For a lot of people, they believe that Nessie sightings are basically just misidentification. It's people seeing things that occur naturally, that we understand and we know, and saying it's the monster.
Yeah.
Basically. So like I said, I got to do something very exciting for this episode. I got to speak to Adrian Shine, who is an expert on Loch Ness. He's worked there a long time. And it was interesting to sit and listen to him and learn more about the science and the research happening at the Loch, not just Nessie. Because, it's our home, so it's interesting to know the history and a bit more about the natural life there.
Yeah.
It was really cool. He was part of the team that found the wreckage of John Cobb's land speed record attempt. And I don't know if you know about that.
I think I only know about it from you talking about it at the end of the interview. But I was wondering about shipwrecks in Loch Ness, combining with reading my book and then talking about it.
Well, I can't speak about shipwrecks, but...
like boat wrecks and sunken boats and such.
That's what I mean. I don't know if they exist. They probably do. I'd imagine they would. But basically, Cobb tried to break the land speed record in 1952. But unfortunately, it went wrong. And his vehicle, which was called the Crusader, crashed and he died. And I think it was in 2016. I can't remember the year. Basically, Adrian was part of the team that found where the wreckage was for the first time. And they were able to study it and kind of see what state it was in. But they left it in the loch. They didn't take it out.
So did he crash and into the loch? Oh man.
Yep.
In my head, you said land speed record, but I heard sea speed record or water speed record because it was in the water.
No, land speed record, but he crashed in the loch. I think he was travelling over water, but I can't remember. Land speed record.
Yeah.
He crashed. But Adrian's also helped recover core samples that are more than 5 metres long from the bottom of the loch.
Oh wow.
Which sounds so much less cool than it is. Because these core samples tell us everything about climate and what the loch was like and what the land was like thousands of years ago. And they're 5 metres.
So that's long.
Yeah, and he said that in the sample you can see, and this is his quote, the day the Ice Age ended. So, because there's a difference in the soil, you can see the glacial sludge, which I think is what he said. And then there's a really sudden change in the quality of the soil, where it wasn't as cold. And you can see it in the sample.
Wild.
And I just think that's amazing.
That is.
Absolutely amazing that you could see that yourself.
Yeah.
And it's something that he was really proud of. He said on our phone call that it was a big achievement.
Absolutely.
And he talks a lot about the cachet of Loch Ness. So they had this project where they were getting these core samples, but they needed people to work with them who were experts in different fields so that they could be analysed properly. And one of the selling points was that this is from Loch Ness.
Yeah.
And how did he put it? I've got it written down. He said, there's a cachet around Loch Ness that even penetrates the austere exterior of the scientific mind.
Oh, yeah.
So, these are people of science with very practical minds, but they hear that this is a sample from Loch Ness, oh yeah, I'll definitely take a look at that.
Oh, that'd be cool.
Yeah. So
funny.
It was analysed all over the world by different experts, and they learned a lot about just the formation of the loch and the history in general. It was very, very cool. There were lots of great quotes from when we spoke. He's much better spoken than I am. I think I'll feel quite bad if I post our interview, because I think I just say that's incredible over and over again.
I just feel like the woman in My Fair Lady.
Kinda, yeah. I just felt so illiterate talking to him because he was so interesting, and I just liked listening, really. I didn't want to interrupt him ever because I just wanted to hear more. Now, as far as theories go for the Loch Ness Monster, Adrian had some interesting things to say. And one of the main things that we talked about was the environmental DNA project that he was a part of in 2018. And it's super interesting. Basically, Adrian was part of a group that took samples from all around the loch. So the top, the bottom, everywhere. They took these water samples and they were able to examine them and extract DNA from them.
Oh, cool.
And this project was huge. It got picked up by loads of news outlets that followed the project and wanted the results, since it was a great chance to finally discover the monster, because you're examining the DNA of the loch. It was mega. It was a big deal. So basically, animals that live in water shed DNA through skin cells.
Makes sense.
In very basic terms. So if you filter these water samples, you can extract the DNA and you can find the DNA of all the animals that live in that water. Does that make sense?
Yep.
The catch is DNA doesn't last long in fresh water.
Okay.
Which isn't necessarily a bad thing. It just means that the results from the samples you take in fresh water show what's living in the loch now. Not a long time ago.
Yep.
So whatever's living in the loch now, in the present, will show up in these DNA samples. Adrian explained all this to me. I'm very grateful to him, because I don't think I could do a good job if he hadn't explained it to me. So they looked at the results from these samples and found there was a lot of eel DNA.
Oh. Well, there you go.
There's lots of eels living in the loch. Which is not entirely surprising. Eels are native to Scotland.
Yeah.
I think you find them in most lochs.
I saw there was an eel that lived in the river where we swam that we see sometimes. It would like, I say scurry, didn't scurry,
Wiggle?
but yeah, it would scurry into the rocks if we had the goggles on. We were like searching for it. You see this eel just disappearing into the rocks.
That's horrible. I really don't like eels.
Very creepy.
But what was interesting was in the samples that they took from the loch, there was more eel DNA than anything else.
Oh.
So there's now a theory that what people have seen and identified as the monster is actually a giant eel.
Mm.
And it's tricky because the eel DNA, although it is there, it doesn't prove one way or the other that it's the monster.
Well, eels big and small would have eel DNA, wouldn't they?
Exactly. So eels are really gross, basically. They have really small scales, which is one of the reasons they're so smooth. But they're also really, really slimy. But what this means is that eels shed more DNA than other fish and like water animals do. So that could explain the high levels of eel DNA in the sample, because they just shed more.
Yeah.
But, like you said, if one or two humongous giant eels was living in the loch, they would have the same DNA as lots and lots of little eels. Mm-hmm. So it doesn't prove anything other than there are eels in the loch. Yeah. Basically.
That's interesting though, and with it being so deep, I don't know anything about giant eels. Presumably they could exist. Seems like it could be a thing.
I should think so, but it's that thing that we said, that people want to believe in a monster, so they change their expectations to fit what they know. So they'll say, oh yeah, there is the Loch Ness Monster, it's a giant eel.
Yeah. But then if we're living in like the depths, and it's very cold down there, I imagine it wouldn't really like going up to the warmer bit.
No.
And very cold and very dark. So now it would come up to rear its head and be like, meh, and then smash down next to someone's boat.
Yeah.
And disappear back to the depths to go about its life.
When we were talking about the DNA project, Adrian said, and this is a direct quote from him, "We will not disprove the Loch Ness Monster because people don't want us to.
Yeah.
I can only fail to find Loch Ness Monsters. I can't succeed in finding an answer. I know that and I'm content with it. I'm resigned to it." So when he first introduced himself to me on the phone, he's saying he's been failing to find the Loch Ness Monster for 50 years.
50 years,
That's been his job. That's what he's done. And he's right, because even though that they have this DNA and there's nothing reptilian in it, nothing like that, people just change what they think. Oh, well, it must be a giant eel. That's what's in the water. Even though the evidence doesn't prove that. That's not what people care about. Mm-hmm. I spoke to Adrian about some of the sightings of Nessie, and for a lot of them, he believes that boat wakes, waterbirds, and seals are to blame for most of them. Especially when you consider how many present-day sightings are seen over webcam, which we talked about at the beginning, because webcam footage is not the best. The quality isn't great. It's really not very clear. So what is actually a boat out on the loch, on a webcam, could look like a big ominous hump. Yeah,
or like a little canoe.
Mm-hmm. Or even just the wake from a boat.
Yeah.
You know, the way that looks sometimes, it can look like something solid in the water, and the footage can't be resolved properly, so if it's something you can't explain, it's the monster, because it's from the loch.
Yeah. It's interesting there are seals in the loch.
Yeah, I don't think they're very common.
I didn't know that.
But they sometimes make their way there.
So they make their way up the canal?
Mm-hmm.
Damn. That's even more impressive because it's through a lock system.
Mm-hmm. Or it does happen.
From this side. Might not be from the other side. Yeah, that's really weird. I didn't know that.
He said something similar about sonar footage to webcam footage. Mm-hmm. That it's just not very clear, and although you'll get a blip on sonar, you can't always tell what it is. It's like what you were saying about the rocks. You can't tell, it's not clear. And he made a good point, which I didn't think of. Loch Ness has really steep sides, which causes havoc with sonar. Because...
Oh yeah, because it makes it bouncy.
Yeah, it's really, really steep. And you have the layers of warm and cold water that I talked about at the start. That also affects sonar equipment. So you have all of this working against sonar. So it's difficult to tell for sure what you're seeing.
And you can, like I did, you can see the same thing and be like, well, that could be a shoal of mackerel or it could be a whale.
Exactly.
Both. Could be both. Could be either.
I love this because I sound really technical and it's all Adrian. He's done me such a solid.
Ooh, sonar. Steep sides. Hot and cold water.
Right?
Like the taps.
I sound like a professional. I never sound like a professional. So
you can't just say that.
I asked him the big question. I asked him what he was most inclined to say was the monster. Or what was the reason for the legend of the monster. And Adrian reckons it's sturgeon.
Nicholas?
I knew you were going to say that. Nicola. Not Nicholas.
Nicholas.
Female First Minister.
Yeah, all right.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, I just said the wrong thing.
Thank you very much.
It's because it's Nicholas Sturgeon. It could be Nicholas Turgeon.
No. This was supposed to be like a big moment because the expert is giving his expert opinion on what he thinks the Loch Ness Monster might be.
A sturgeon?
Yes. So sturgeons are massive fish. Like frighteningly big.
Okay.
I don't like fish, so meeting one of these would just be a disaster for me. They're quite scary. They're kind of shark-like in the way they look. They're very long, but they can grow to between 7 and 12 feet long.
Really?
Yes.
Oh, wow.
I don't know if that's like a specific type of sturgeon, because there's lots of different types, but regardless of the type, they're big. They're big fish.
I see, because I was trying to think what big fish there could be. I didn't think there was any. It's like, oh, like pike they're quite big, but they don't get super big. In the way that in America you get like catfish that can be a humongous. I didn't think we had any fish like that.
Well, sturgeon, that's what we have.
Oh.
And apparently, according to Adrian, it wouldn't be completely impossible for a sturgeon to end up in the loch, even though they aren't supposed to be there.
Okay.
So in the 1870s, a sturgeon was caught at the mouth of the Caledonian Canal, which is what leads into the loch. And Adrian was saying that the Moray Firth was one of the last refuges of the North Sea sturgeon, which leads into the Caledonian Canal.
Interesting.
You see? So it's not completely impossible. Now, sturgeon are apparently a lot like salmon, in that when they reach fresh water, they stop feeding and they look for a mate. So it's likely if a sturgeon made its way into the loch, that's what it would do. But when it couldn't find a mate, it would leave again. And he made a good point. Adrian said the most elusive candidate for the monster would basically be one that wasn't there all the time. So a sturgeon would be a pretty good choice. See, it's plausible.
It's pretty good. It's pretty good. 12 feet. I can't believe that.
But he did mention that a sturgeon wouldn't be responsible for all the sightings of the monster that we have.
Yeah.
Like the long neck and the humps and things. That's not a sturgeon. But he reckons that's where things like water birds and seals and boats come in. So it's kind of a combination that on very, very rare occasions there are sturgeon in the loch.
Yes.
But people are also identifying the long necks of water birds.
I think it's like a heron has quite a long neck, doesn't it?
There's quite a lot of water birds that have long, because they dive for fish. So the combination of the two.
That's a swan, sir. Oh.
It's a seagull. It's an intriguing theory. I kind of like it.
Yeah, I like that.
But this is where I have trouble, because like I listened to Adrian say all this himself, and I believe him. It's very plausible. He knows a lot more than I do, so it's probably the truth. But I cannot visit the loch without feeling excited that I'm going to see the monster. And the monster as I imagine it in my head. I always look for it. Like, I'm always scanning the news. If I see something in the news, I always click on it and I always look at the photos. Like, you're always looking at the waves expecting to see something, even if you believe the way that, like I just said and like you said earlier, that, you know, there's not a monster there. So why do we keep looking?
Yeah. That's interesting that you do that, because I don't think I would.
Oh, I do. Every time I go.
Oh, because we drove around Loch Ness last summer, and it didn't cross my head to look in the loch.
Really?
Other than to look at its size.
Well, you were driving.
Well, I was driving, but even still.
No, I do it every time.
But then, saying that, driving to and from Ullapool, you go past a loch around Garve, I don't know what it's called. And as a child in the passenger seat, I would always look into it to see if I could see anything in the water.
A loch at Garve?
It's like on the left if you're driving from Ullapool to Inverness. You come up a windy bit of road and there's a huge bit of loch on your left side.
Yes, yeah, I know where you are now. Sorry.
I'm not sure what it's called.
I can't remember. I know what you are.
Is
that near Rogie?
I don't know.
I think it's near Rogie Falls.
Could be.
Anyway.
But I would always look out, because there's a bit where the trees break and you see into the loch. And I'd always look at the loch hoping to see something.
Well, I do that as a 27-year-old adult.
27-year-old lady.
Hell yeah. But I was saying earlier that you're always sort of scanning the waves, looking for something. During my research, I was seeing that the waves themselves are probably a source of a lot of sightings, because there's particular patterns to the waves on Loch Ness that make it look more unusual and like a monster. They look more solid. There's something to do with the quality of like how choppy waves look on that loch and the way it reflects the mountains around it.
Oh yeah,
that make them look solid.
Yeah, because they'd appear a lot darker.
So even the waves are against you and playing with your mind.
Yeah, because if you see waves from like when the ferry comes in, go the ferry to Ullapool, if you look from Ardmere and you see them from quite far away, they are bumps in the water that are moving. And they're moving towards you, but they kind of look like they're moving like parallel with you.
Which I imagine,
because of the way the waves move,
is a lot of what people have seen.
And they don't break. So it's not, because if a wave breaks you can see it's a wave. But before it breaks it's just a lump in the water. And
it just looks solid.
Yeah. And they travel really far. So a boat could go past and be like 50 minutes later and then the wave appears in front of you. Maybe not 50 minutes later, but like a while later.
It's not immediate all the time.
So the boat's already gone and you see these bumps. Well, what on earth is that?
I feel like the legend of the monster really has a life of its own. We said it right at the beginning that it just captures your imagination in a way that few things do. And I think it kind of captures a lot of who we are as humans, that we want to believe in things that are otherworldly and we want to be afraid to a point. Like we have this fascination of life that came before us that we don't understand. And I think that's what the legend represents. As not even necessarily hunting for knowledge, but just wanting to believe that things like that are out there.
Yeah, to believe there's still mystery and wonder.
And it's something that brings everyone together. Like especially in the Highlands. Like it's our story. We're proud to have it.
Well, if it was somehow proven that there's no monster, and I don't know how that would be, but it was definitive, like nope, absolute proof, Nessie doesn't exist, I would be crushed.
But you see, I don't even think you would be. I don't think anyone would believe it.
Well, but that's what I'm saying though. If it somehow came out that something happened, it's like boom, we drained the loch, there's no monster there, you'd be so, or I'd be so upset, and that's as I'm like 90% skeptic.
People don't want a definitive answer unless it's the monster.
Yeah.
I think it's always going to exist. I think there's always going to be Nessie in the loch. What are your final thoughts on the monster?
I think there's some pretty cool stories, and there's definitely there's things in the deep that you can't imagine or comprehend. Like I listened to Neil deGrasse Tyson talking about James Cameron and his adventures to the deep and his inspiration for Avatar, and he said like there's more things under the water that your imagination can't comprehend than there is in space. Like it's all here, it's all in front of us, but it's still as unreachable as space is. Which then Neil deGrasse Tyson countered that in space there's things just beyond reckoning, or there could be things just beyond reckoning. But when there's 800 feet of water, like even a 12-foot sturgeon, like that's documented, we know about it, but it's hard to believe. So there could be giant eels and other mysteries, and just the mystery of the sea will always be a mystery. I
fully agree that there are things that we can't even imagine in deep water.
Yeah.
Fully, because I mean, we've never been down there. You can't explore it. I think it would be foolish to think that we know everything. And I don't necessarily believe in, like, aliens the way that some people believe in aliens. But I have a similar feeling to deep water as I have to space, that, well, we don't know. So it's silly to imagine we know everything.
Yeah.
I think having a bit of humility in situations like this is a good way to view it, because then you're open to anything. And you never assume that you're the smartest person in the room. Unless you're Neil deGrasse Tyson.
Well, I mean, he has a good claim to be able to say these things.
Far more than I do.
Yeah. But so there are undoubtedly things in the loch that would surprise you.
Mm-hmm. I agree with that. But I kind of agree. I lean more to what you said earlier. I think there maybe was something. Even like before the 1930s, when there was all that madness. I think a long time ago, maybe closer to like the 1500s and the 1800s, I think maybe there was something and there isn't anymore. I think. Or if there is something that was related to that, it's smaller.
Yeah.
And isn't seen, if that makes sense.
Because if it's died and it's hundreds of feet down, we'll never know.
That's what I think. But I'll still search. If I'm going past a loch, I will still look.
Yeah, you'll just have a swatch.
I can't not.
Gotta have a swatch.
And that is the story of the Loch Ness Monster. Our season finale.
Our finale has finished.
I hope you enjoyed it. That was so long.
I enjoyed it.
My throat is so sore.
I am not surprised. That's probably the whiskey as much as the talking.
I don't know. I don't think it was just the whiskey. Yeah. It's just... I've been talking for a long time.
Very nice. 17 creatures of the deep out of 17.
Oh. Well, shall we have a little rap party for ourselves? Shall we have a little chat about the season as a whole?
Yes.
Yes?
I think so.
You want to do it?
Sure.
I know, sigh of relief, we've made it. I managed to talk to you for like 12 hours at least over the course of the season.
It's a lot of hours. It's the most we've talked in years.
I know, many thousands of words. It's quite an achievement. I'm so proud of what we've managed to do.
I know. Good job, Buzz. Favourite episode?
My favourite episode.
Yeah. Not your favourite murder.
That's something different. I think it's a tie. Am I allowed to have a tie?
No.
No.
Of course you're allowed to have a tie.
Okay. My tie, and that's because it's for different reasons. So I think I'm most proud of the Burke and Hare episodes, because that was the most amount of work, I think. They all take a lot of work, and I spend a lot of time on each episode, but those two in particular, I was so proud of how I wrote it and the research and everything. But I think my favourite episode is The Black Lady of Lark Hall.
Oh, yeah?
I think that's my favourite. Just on the story, I think that's my favourite story. I love a ghost story. I'm a big, big ghost believer.
Just a big ghost.
You can't tell everyone. God.
Spoilers, we're ghosts.
We've been ghosts this whole time.
This whole time.
What about you? What's your favourite?
Possibly this one.
Really?
I thoroughly enjoyed that.
Aww.
I thoroughly enjoyed learning about Nessie.
That's so sweet. I feel like you were more involved this episode.
I was quite involved in the Flannan Isle lighthouse.
Yeah, you enjoyed that one.
Which I also very enjoyed. Very much
I'm not just saying that to be big-headed. You told me afterwards you enjoyed that one. I'm not just giving myself a pat on the back.
There's definitely a theme though. If it's to do with water, I have much more to say.
But then you know more.
Yeah.
It makes sense.
My upbringing. I wasn't brought up by ghosts or with ghosts.
Or selkies.
Or selkies.
Or were you?
Oh, Mum, when did you come gullible? Dad, is that really a wetsuit?
Dun dun dun. Yeah, I think it's a two-way tie for me.
Yeah. For you, dear listener, wonderful friend, if you have feedback or suggestions or
Suggestions greatly appreciated, by the way. Now is the time.
Yeah. Then please email us at generallyspooky@gmail.com.
That would be really helpful. I have a master list of episodes, which I think I've mentioned here before, of things I want to do. But if there are specific things that you want to hear, I'd far rather hear from you what you would want.
Yeah, and if there's like audio or there's any problems or anything you'd like more or less of, please let us know. That would be very useful.
Even ideas for like things that aren't episodes. If there are other things that you want to hear, tell us.
Other spook. You can't tell us that you just want rid of me, though.
Nobody will want rid of you.
Yeah, it's great, except that Kieran guy keeps interrupting and ruining the story.
No, you're great. I would go on strike.
Well, we will be back.
I don't want to say goodbye.
I know.
I don't want to disappear.
It's been too much fun.
We only exist in an audio file. If we don't release episodes, we don't exist.
Spooky. But we will be coming back. We were going to tell you we will be coming back, and we were going to tell you roughly when.
Yes, we have some ideas for when we're going to return, because we are definitely returning.
Yep.
This is too much fun to only have one season. We've loved it so much.
And we're not beholden to anyone, so we can't get cancelled.
Yeah, we can do whatever we want. So we're going to be returning with a 3-episode special miniseries all about witchcraft in Scotland. And that's going to be released, we think, sometime in August.
Yes.
Of this year, 2021, August. And then we will be coming back with season 2 of the podcast in September.
Yes.
So you don't have too long to wait. It's only a couple months.
Yep.
That's when we will be returning.
We just need some time to do some prep work and for you to do research and to record and stuff.
Because this has been a lot.
Yeah, the last 2 or 3 have been week on week.
Only the past 2.
And it's just kind of a lot to do them week on week.
So we need some time to prepare and get everything ready, and then we will be back.
We will be back.
With a whole other season.
I know. Bigger and better. No, it'll be the same.
Don't put that on me.
It'll be the same. Possibly with sponsors.
You keep saying
possibly
it
with
hasn't
a certain
happened. No,
someone.
no, will you just stop?
That's what we're ending.
No, I don't think that's what we should end. I think we should end on a happier note, not me losing my mind.
Now that you've listened to the whole series, we hope you liked it. Please get in touch at generallyspooky@gmail.com to discuss sponsorship.
Well, Kieran, you can do that. I am going to say thank you to every single person who has listened to this. We've been blown away by how many people have listened.
Yeah, we're really happy.
It's insane. Like, actually insane.
Yeah.
And we really hope you enjoyed it. We would love to hear from you. Definitely follow us over on the Generally Spooky Facebook page, the Generally Spooky Instagram, which is just at Generally Spooky.
Yep.
I'll do my best to keep you entertained and up to date over there.
Mm-hmm.
And once we have a specific season 2 date and mini-series date, that is where I will let you know.
Yes.
So be sure to be following us over there. That's the place to be.
It is indeed. And thank you very much. And cheers to you for doing such a good job.
Thank you. Cheers.
Have the last dribble.
And for the last time this season, thank you for listening.
Thank you.
We will speak to you soon.
We will. Bye.
Bye.